ornithology and natural history. And she's currently working as a project scientist and program coordinator in Wildlife Institute of India. And she has worked on various projects on bird migration and wetland management, etc. So she'll have her live lecture on bird migration, and she'll be answering your questions after the session. So yeah, welcome everyone. And if you're okay, shall we start?
Yes, I'll just share my screen.
Sure, yeah. Also, please unmute yourself if you're not talking while the lecture is going on. And yeah, thank you, everyone.
Are you able to see the presentation now?
Yeah, the presentation is live.
Okay, thank you. And I'm very sorry for the delay today. There have been some traffic conditions, so I couldn't come on time. Really very sorry. So starting today, bird migration talk. Uh, okay, I'm not able to switch. Okay, yes. So, what is bird migration? It basically to and fro movement. It's just I'll adjust my screen. I'm not able to see properly. Okay, sorry. So talking about bird migration, it's the greatest phenomena in natural Earth, or probably a greatest phenomena in the wildlife what we see. Uh, so basically, it is a to and fro movement from one place to another. It is mostly in a larger scale. It can be for longer duration and can be for a shorter duration. It can be for a season or even for a day. Uh, it depends upon the conditions. The migration may depend upon if the conditions are favorable to migrate, or the conditions where the birds are living are unfavorable to migrate. These are mostly predictable. Why it's now predictable is because we are now knowing much more about migration as before. So mostly it is a predictable phenomena. It could be of individual or of population. There are certain bird population of which not all individuals may migrate, or not all the races will migrate, depends upon where they are in the globe. Uh, it could be non-stop or with stopovers. So there are birds who migrate non-stops. For example, there are birds like Partil Godwit, who is known to migrate 11 days non-stop. And there are birds like probably buntings and pipits who may stop within 1 or 2 day or even a day, and they may take a flight during the night and stop by the day. The migration behavior is mostly innate or learned. What do you mean by innate or learned is uh, the bird, for example, the juvenile, the young bird may have this behavior by its birth, transferred by its parents. So it is got a sort of ingrained in the biological clock. So it can be innate, or the young ones may be learning from the adults from with whom they will be flying to certain area. Though bird migration is a common phenomena even in humans, it's not associated only to the birds, but the migration in birds, of course, is very much fascinating to study because of the great distances they could travel, unlike other animals. Migration is not a recent phenomena. Of course, we have been noticing it from time and again. So there have been some of the instances in Vedic Purana in the pre-Vedic period where there have been mentions of geese crossing over Mansarovar, or there have been mentions that especially in the 13th century, that there is a seasonal change in bird abundance or the type of birds which we see around us. So this is nothing new, but it has been seen or noticed way before. Uh, One of the earlier examples is when Aristotle, a great thinker, philosopher, and uh, in many ways, a lot of scientific findings is acclaimed. So for him also, Aristotle also have given a lot of examples of bird migration, where he is saying that certain birds, example robins, are changing into some other birds. His association of changing to another birds is because he was not able to see certain birds, and hence assumed the species itself is changing, which now we know is not true, is that there are birds who leave and there are new birds who come. So there are some of the misconceptions or myths with the migration. There were myths like there are a number of birds who go to sleep, that's why we don't see them, and they don't know where these birds sleep. So these kind of examples were sort of drawn, and now when we know more about migration, we are understanding many aspects of where do the birds go exactly and how do they migrate. So, why do birds migrate? First of all, for maximizing resource use. And in the map, you can see that there are ice covered in the Siberian region, or maybe closer to the polar regions in both sides. So the most common migration is north to south migration. So when during uh, around October, or sorry, during yes, around October or July end, in the Siberian region, for example, when there is onset of snow, when the land freezes, so all these birds start moving towards the tropic. That is the most common migration which we see, and the most common migration which we study also. Why they go back, if we say that it is such a difficult place to be there, then why they can't stay in tropics? Tropics give them an advantage of more daylight. Hence, it is a very good location for nesting. For example, in Siberia, the daylight during the summers, it will be daylight throughout the day. So there will be very very less. Like there won't be a sunset, as in there will be a very bright day or very less bright day in the evenings. So that way, they have more opportunity to feed. There is more abundance of food for them. Hence, the best nesting location for these birds. Also, coming back to the earlier point, they escape the harsh winters of the polar regions and they come towards tropic, and they migrate. They avoid predators in the winters when the food is scarce. There will be certain animals who will be depending upon these birds, so they choose to migrate in that way, avoiding that kind of predation. Reduce competition. It's not like that there are no birds in the winters in those regions of Siberia, or the Palearctic regions. There are birds, but there would be scarcity of food, and hence to avoid this scarcity of food, they choose to migrate down. Also, to optimize resource use, as we have spoken, they maximize their resource use in either way. Uh, so coming towards India, from where do we receive birds in Indian region? So if you can see in the image, the Palearctic region above India. So these are the zoogeographic zones of the world. We are into Indo-Malayan regions, and we have some Himalayan regions also. Most of the birds which we receive in India are from the Palearctic region. You can see how elaborate or how expansive is the Palearctic region above India is. So we also do receive some of the birds from Sahara Arabian subregions. We receive birds from Afrotropical regions. We receive a tiny amount from Madagascar region, but not exactly. But for example, for Seychelles and all those regions. We also receive birds from Australian region. So these birds are quite these birds which I'm mentioning are mostly long distance migrants, and through through a lot of studies, we know that where do we receive these birds. Also, prior to that, we know where are the breeding areas of these birds, and when we see them in India, they have come to winter. So I'll explain it further. So that is how we know that from which all regions the birds are coming to India. Uh, so, in a general sense, there are broadly five types of migration, that is north south, west east, altitudinal, nomadic, and eruptive. So in this map you can see India lies in the Central Asian flyway, and we are also sort of overlapped with East Asian Oscillation flyway and then the West East African flyway. So these flyways are mostly a result of lot of studies which we came across ducks and waders, the paths which they take to come to India. So this map is sort of a result of those tracking which we have done through these birds, basically ducks and waders. So here you can see that Central Asia flyways going towards Russia and then coming down to Sri Lanka. So mostly the birds coming through this is north and south migration. We have west and east. West and east migration would be from African region to towards India, and the to and fro movement. Altitudinal movement in India, mostly altitudinal movement happens. The best example would be the Himalayas. For example, the blue rock thrush, a bird of which breeds in Himalayas, or the warblers. Let's say any leaf warblers, uh, Western crowned leaf warbler and all. So these warblers who breeds in Himalayas, they come down they come down towards the main let's say south of India uh, for the favorable seasons, because in Himalayas during that time it is very cold to for these birds to sustain, and they go back when they have to breed. Nomadic migrations are there is not many examples of nomadic migration. It is sort of when for example some of the young ones who will be flying for the first time, they take a lot of different ways. They try out different ways. They may not follow the patterns of the time. There are examples of birds which travel only like without parents or in under supervision of very less adults. So, for example, there were two of the flamingos which were found somewhere. Uh, Hello.
मी जास्त मॅन्युअल वरच करते तुला त्याच्यात पण बोट मध्ये पण माझे चांगले थर्ड पार्टी
Sorry
थर्ड
about
पार्टी
that. I'll unmute.
काय
Sorry,
ते
I'll mute. You can continue.
गडबड सॉल्व केले चांगले चांगले फोटोज माझे
Yeah, please.
Okay. For example, there were some birds like flamingos who were found in Russian lakes. It was a result of sort of nomadic migration. They couldn't they sort of explored rather than the normal way of the normal flyway. They explored some other way. So there are some examples of nomadic migration. There are eruptive migrations. These are the examples. Eruptive migration, for example, when there is a scarcity of food, a sudden scarcity of food, or there is a sudden lack of, let's say, a water resource which have been available for generations. Suddenly, that particular, for some reason, that this particular resource is not available to the birds. So then they migrate. That's an eruptive migration, which is not an usual migration. It is a result of something which have happened, which is an exceptional condition for the birds. So what is the origin of bird migration? So you must have studied this map in your geography lessons about Pangaea and Gondwana, and how we have different continents together. So one of the theories for bird migration, which is mostly endorsed in the studies, and this is only for the long distance migration, not for the short distance migration, is that there are birds. So when you see the first image of Pangea, you see these are all together. And then now what we see in the earth today, we see them apart. So the assumptions is that these birds were breeding in the tropics. The no, so, in the these birds were breeding, which is now the polar, but not initially the polar, which was favorable condition. And when the continent started moving up, they kept the tendency to come back to the breeding areas, or go back to the breeding areas where they have initially been. So when the continents started moving apart, this kind of the distances for travel increased for them, and it have been, with generations, they have adapted to do this to and fro movement annually when the conditions are unfavorable to them. This is one of the likely theories which we think that why the long distance migration have evolved, and when we study migration, long distance migration is more uh, how to say, is more interesting to study, because there is a lot of dynamics, there is a lot of other variables which we have to answer rather than a short distance migration. Uh, so how the migration is initiated, it requires genetic instruction. So there could be timing and duration of movement in the temporal. It will be a circannual program of the organism. It's a physiological adaptation. It's a behavioral adaptation also. Behavioral adaptation would be because of the weather, wind, currents during the journey. So when I'm talking during the journey at this point, and control of orientation and navigation. So these are the basics of migration, and this requires, of course, genetic instruction, which I had previously told that it could be innate by their parents. So how the migration is initiated? Uh, for example, we are somewhere in Siberia, and we consider ourselves a bird at this point of time. So there is a change in day length. When I say that we have almost 24 hours of daylight in Siberia, and suddenly I'm seeing there is a change. Now I don't see that 24 hours of daylight. I rather see that it is changing. So that's the first cue for me that there is a change in daylight. Once the change in daylight happens, I understand there will be a subsequently this day length will be more stronger, and there will be lesser food available. So this triggers photoreceptors in the brain, which understands that there is a change in the day length. This on the go triggers the hormonal change in the body. This hormonal change in the body indicates that this is the time that we should fatten up, or we should get ourselves ready to migrate. So what happens is, in this case, the bird start gaining weight and increase its fat storage. And also, the two most important things in terms of body is that we should have good body weight. A bird should have a good body weight. It should have good fat storage. Why fat storage? Because fat storage is converted to lipids in the bird body, and lipids are very important for a instant energy, and it's a long term energy which will keep you afloat or in the air for a very long time compared to any other form of energy. Feathers. Why feathers is because, of course, you need very fresh, very good, very strong feathers. So when the bird starts preparing, it also starts like molting its new feathers. I'll explain further in this. So here I am showing you. So there is a fat deposition. The yellow thing which you see in the second photo is the fat deposition. The other bird doesn't have this fat. Uh, if, when we get a bird like this, we understand that since the fat deposition here, you see there is a quite a lot of fat deposition for this. Probably a not even a 6 gram bird. It's probably less than that. So this will be a fat deposition which will help this bird to move further. It is now capable enough, it have energy enough to go further, while the other bird, you won't see very less, hardly any fat deposition, and we may consider that this bird may remain in the same place where this was caught, because it is absolutely, there is no fat deposition. It will try to eat and build a fat and then probably go ahead. So for this bird particularly, which we'll talk again, is when you see the fat deposition, it is understandable that it may not stop for a very long distance, or it may the stopover will be very less for this bird because it's have a very good fat content. Molting of okay, this photo is missing. Anyway, molting of new feathers. Okay, I can explain this further in some of the other examples. Okay. So how birds migrate, they follow odor compass, sun compass, star compass, and magnetic compass, or the mix of everything. So odor compass, for example, some of the pigeons, whom we know are good in homing instincts. So we know that home pigeons are sort of they can come back to the place, or they know where to come back and all. Of course, they are trained in many ways, but but pigeons are the best examples where they can smell and they can mark their way back from where they originated. So for some species, they follow a map which they can smell. They can smell a lot of things. For example, food. A sun compass. There are birds who orient themselves. The best examples are the birds who fly during the day. They can orient themselves. They start during the twilight. They can orient themselves accordingly, uh, and follow the sun's direction, and hence they move. Star compass. As we understand stars, as we understand constellations, birds also understand constellations in many ways for navigation. So they follow this type is called star navigation. What they do, it's somewhat same like sailors do. Magnetic compass. Uh, Magnetic compass is that they understand the Earth's magnetism. They know the north and south direction. Why they know is because they can orient themselves that way. There is a small level of iron content behind their eye, which helps them to navigate this Earth's magnetic field. Uh, there are lot many experiments. How we know this is through lot many experiments in caged birds, where they have sort of during the spring migration or the autumn migration. Uh, Instead of spring and autumn, I can say northward or southward migration. So during these kind of migrations, it have been seen that the bird have been in a restless situation and tend to move in certain direction. Uh, when they were able to manage the magnetic field in a lab situation, then the bird was disoriented. It couldn't understand where to go. So, and then there were a lot of other experiments which where we found that there is a small protein which helps them to navigate the Earth compass. So how birds migrate again? So majority can be classified as either nocturnal or diurnal, although no species is exclusively one or other. So nocturnal, for example, many birds fly at night, like flycatchers, cuckoos, sparrows, and there are some diurnal, for example, some birds which fly in the morning time, bunting, pipits, pigeons, starling, storks, and cranes. So how we can understand that some of the species can fly nocturnal. You see the examples, flycatchers, cuckoos, and sparrows. These are small birds. They are very much liable to be preyed upon. So they prefer to travel at night. And you can see that most of our raptors or the birds of prey will be traveling at in the daytime. So these nocturnal birds, the strategy is one to avoid predator during the during the nighttime, and during the day they take rest in some of the other areas. So another example of diurnal migration, which I was saying before, is of eagles or the birds of prey. So why they birds of prey do they travel during the diurnal time, or the storks or cranes or pelicans, the larger birds, why they do travel in the daytime is because they take advantage of the thermals. So when you see, when if you have ever noticed a eagle or a black kite flying near to you, so they start going around on they take advantage of the hot air which is coming above, and they go they climb up the altitude as the hot air moves up. So this help many of the birds of prey to cross great mountains, for example, even Himalayas, that all these birds, they take advantage of thermals. So when they take advantage of thermals, they reduce their effort to fly. So flying such long migration is a very energy intensive uh, uh, thing to do for birds. So they reduce this by using thermals. These birds are huge. Their wing area is huge, and they take advantage in this way. So this, now you can see that even there are some birds who are able to manage their migration according to the condition which is favorable, and avoid any kind of competition along the way. So there, what are the patterns of migration? Previously, when I told the patterns of migration, there were very few. Now you see we are going into a bit more detail. So north-south migration is latitudinal. For example, the birds coming from Russia to India would be north and south. West to east, I'll give you more examples as we go. Then, apart from the major migrations, there are seasonal, molt, and drift migrations. There is long distance and short distance migration. So, before I get into the bigger ones, let's explain the seasonal, molt, and drift migration. So, seasonal, as I told before, that seasonal migration will not necessarily be a migration which depends upon any climatic condition. It is simply because of the availability of food. For example, certain season in some forest, there will be fruiting in some fig tree. And there you will see that lot of birds will be coming in. It could be local, it could be, partial migratory birds. So these are sort of seasonal migration where they just go around with the availability of the food. Molt migration in some duck species, many of the duck species, it is seen that they do a molt migration. Certain duck species do molting where they are breeding. So when they are breeding, they sort of take the feathers fall out, and they are flightless for some time. And then after the breeding happens, the whole cycle is over. They develop new wings and they fly. In certain cases, many of the ducks, they fly. For example, there are Canada example of Canada goose. They fly to certain place and they shed off their feathers so they can develop new feathers. And there, they take their time. They stay for a few months and they develop new feathers to further go down south. So these molt migration is very important for certain of the species because they choose the sites that they will be safe. uh, of course, they are not safe now in those sites because now many of us know that those sites how are they, and they are prone to hunting in these kind of areas. So one of the conservation initiative in some of these countries is that you safeguard these molt migratory stopover sites where you know that the birds are flightless and of course helpless, so it's easy to catch. So there are a lot of initiative where they conserve these kind of birds in these areas. Drift migration, this is another very good example of pelagic birds. So if you have all of you are birders, so you must have heard in newspapers like certain kind of pelagic bird was seen in this area, and there are a lot of birders who are flocking in and trying to take photo, and this is a rarity in Indian coastal areas that we see. So this mostly happens, if you correlate it, mostly happens when there is a any kind of cyclonic event in the sea. So these pelagic birds like sooty tern and many more, some of the boobies, so these birds, they could be flying to their either the nesting ground or the stopover sites. But when the cyclonic events happen in the sea, they drift towards the land. So it depends upon where the wind is flowing. So many of these kind of cyclonic events, if it is coming towards, for example, in Indian coastal areas, let's say Odisha or Maharashtra, so these birds will be flown in. So they are result of this kind of cyclonic events, and hence these are drift migration. So drift migration is not seasonal, it is not periodical. It only depends if something unusual is happening in the sea front, and it is mostly seen in the pelagic birds. And long distance and short distance migration is what we will be talking a lot more. Short distance migration, as I told, is could be for a day, or it could be just from mountain top to down. So these are very short distance migration. For example, some bird will be going from Delhi to Madhya Pradesh. So this will be a very short distance migration. Long distance migration is mostly cross boundary migration, or maybe some thousands of kilometers the bird may be migrating. So now we'll talk a little more about the patterns of migration, which is commonly studied. So this is bar-tailed godwit. Here you can see the bird was tagged in somewhere in Russia and it came to Australia. So this was sort of the first time when people understood that there is a continuous migration which is happening. This map is of 2008, but in 2011, researchers found out that these birds can actually migrate like non-stop from Russia to Australia. So here you can see there is almost a straight sort of a line. When we see in globe, it looks like straight. Of course, it's not straight. It's a curved line like the Earth is, but mostly you can see that the expanse of the travel is not very. It's quite narrow. It's not very extensive. Uh, so this is an example of a bird of a female barred godwit which traveled for for 11 days, some thousands of kilometers from Russia to Australia. So this is a very common migration, which is north south, which we study a lot in many birds. Another example of let's say east west migration is of common cuckoo. So this was tagged again somewhere in Japan, and we can see it is traveling through India and towards Africa. So here it's simply an example of east to west migration. It's not always north to south or south to, or not always latitudinal. It's the other way around also. So here another uh, sorry, another good information about this common cuckoo migration is that they also take advantage of the wind which is flowing during this time. And there are insects which will be flowing with this wind. It's a favorable wind condition. These common cuckoos also take advantage that they can get these kind of insects on the go. So it is not they also choose this part depending upon many conditions which will be favorable to them. The circles which you see here in the map, if you can see, are the circles where the bird would have stopped for some time and then would have taken up the journey. So here you see it is not quite narrow, but in India it is actually expanding, probably using more of a resources. But when it is going towards sea, after it is crossing Indian borders, it is actually trying to, some of the birds actually trying to reach the land first rather than going direct south. So these are the strategies, even of same species. The bird may adapt according, probably with age or probably with experience, that whether the bird can fly so far without stopping. Another interesting migration pattern is loop migration. So, an example of domicile crane, here you can see that the breeding site in Mongolia, and there's a wintering site somewhere in Rajasthan and Gujarat. So, while coming from Mongolia, they cross Tibetan Plateau, they are crossing Himalayas, and you can see over Nepal, and then they are coming towards Gujarat. But while going back, they take sort of a longer route. They go via Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then they fly off to Mongolia. So, loop migration is where when the bird takes actually a different migratory route than it took while it came to the wintering site. So, this could be many reasons. The reasons which we found here was the favorable wind condition, the favorable food availability, because it's a long migration. So there are n number of reasons why a bird may choose this kind of loop migration. Mostly why they choose is favorable wind conditions, food availability, safer grounds to move around. This is an example of leapfrog migration. This although it's a uh, not a very common thing to see this kind of leapfrog migration, but here you can see that the birds which are so what happens is the birds which are far north, and the birds which are not so north, but nearly south. So here the breeding location is very closer for the birds in the blue. The wintering location is very closer to them, so they no need to fly, so far. So their travel will be very less. On the other hand, the birds which are in the northern portion, so here the birds will be taking a longer route to come down south. So they may not take the place of where the blue is. Why? Because for the blue color, the bird anyway, the same bird, but it is the different races. So for the blue ones, it is easier for them. So they actually come beforehand the red ones come. So they are already occupied the best places in the north. The red one doesn't have much option nor time. So they immediately take the best available, the next available place which is there, which the southern population have already taken. So this is kind of leapfrog migration where you take a leap from the already existing site which is there because it has been occupied by some other population. Uh, so how birds migrate? So first of all, when I told that they need new good feathers, so the pointed wings are the major factor, one of the major factor in bird's body, which is essential. So here you can see the first picture is of sandpiper, and you can these are actually new feathers, they are not old feathers, but you see the pointedness of these feathers. And you see the other photo of kingfisher, which is more, it's not that pointed but more rounded. So these birds are, they don't migrate that, they are not flying that that distances as these sandpipers fly. So there is a difference between how the bird wing is structured. So most of the birds which migrate for very very long distances and go into too much unfavorable conditions or very tough conditions to fly, they do have pointed wings. It's all depending upon the thermodynamics of how they fly. Uh, they also depend on low wing loading. That depends in the sense that the wing is designed in a way so that you are more prone into tail, which is the tailwind, which is the headwind. So tailwind is the wind which comes from the back, headwind is the one which comes from the front. So your feather is designed in a way that it can withstand this low wing loading. Many birds travel in V formations, and as in this photo you see, so this V formation is again to save energy for these birds. So the bird which is in the front portion is actually taking the maximum bulk of the flying intensity or the winds which is coming on the head and on the wings directly, and it is sort of distributed back to the birds. So the birds which are on the behind, they actually feel less of the turbulence. This is all thermodynamics, if you see. So they understand the wind in a very very better manner, and hence they are able to travel in this way. So the bird which is in the front actually switches places many a times because it's a difficult place so that the other birds can flow. There are some questions.
Should I read?
Should I get back to it later, or
Yeah,
should I
yeah,
read?
yeah. You can, as you wish. Yeah.
Uh, so strong fuel, they also store energy in dense lipids, which I've already spoken earlier. Atrophy of non-essential organs. So, for example, in many birds, in for bar-headed goose especially, no, sorry, not bar-headed goose, bar-tailed godwits, which we had spoken earlier. So they shrunk. By the time they reach to their wintering grounds from Russia, they are actually very very thin. So they go through something called atrophy of non-essential organs, where they reduce the size of this non-essential organs so that they are lesser in weight and they can travel further. This is not seen in many of the birds. It's seen in the birds which go through extreme migration. Uh, High efficiency for muscle contraction, blood oxygen carrying capacity. So now coming to bar-headed goose. So this kind of birds are known that their hemoglobin can actually go for very low level of oxygen as compared to us as humans. So they are sort of built in that way to withstand. They cross over Himalayas, or they cross in great heights. These bar-headed goose and other birds. So they are built in that way. They can function, the body can function, their brain can function even in low oxygen, unlike us. Mm, I'm not able to change. Okay. So coming to migration study techniques, there are direct observations, there are marking methods, there are tracking devices, there are radar studies, and there are stable isotopes. I will only touch upon few of these. There are many more other study techniques also, more and more developing in the coming time. So the direct observations mostly now the recently concluded the Great Backyard Bird Count. So here where you are able to there are citizens who are out there and they are actually counting or enlisting the birds. There are surveys, there are bird census, there are target surveys for these individuals. So these are direct observations where you may not be able to identify the particular individual, or you may not be able to say that from where they have come. Of course, we'll have a general knowledge of it, but when you list down all these birds, it actually give that what is the abundance level and at what time of the year they are present in this particular location. So this is also an example of how we study migration. This is actually very with other techniques. Of course, we go in depth of migration studies, but these are some of the observations which give us maximum information of what is happening in of the majority of the population. Another technique is marking. So we mark them with bird rings, or we mark them for here. You can see there are different sizes of rings, and the bird which is wearing a color flag. So these kind of color flags are sort of every country or every region would be having their own color coding of these color flags. So when we see this bird, for example, if this particular bird goes anywhere in China, so we will be able to see that this is Indian marked bird because of the color coding which is there. So there are different kind of markings which is available. So in one of this like bar-headed goose, they have put a neckband, and in such there are color loops, there are patagial tags, people attach wing tags. So there are different kind of marking which we do, which is put on the bird so that even if a person with binoculars can see, or we can photograph. So all this marking is, though very cheap, these markings are actually a cheaper way of study migration, but we only get information from point A to point B. So if I have tagged this bird in Gujarat in Thol, and then I find this bird somewhere in Himachal, so I know that the bird from Thol have gone to Himachal, but I don't know which from where the bird would have gone. So so this is very easy way of studying, but I can only get answers to A and B and probably a survival. So some of the bar-headed geese which we have tagged is now been since 10 years we are seeing them. So uh, some of their tracking devices may not work for so long, but these can sort of remain for a very long time. So hence we are able to even know that whether the bird survived or not. Even if this bands come out, the leg ring, the ones which we have ringed here, the aluminum rings, this almost remains for the lifetime of the bird. It is built in a way that it sustain the salt water or the different environmental factors. Uh, Another tracking is so there are different kind of tracking devices also. This is some of them. There are many more tracking devices. So these are satellite transmitters, light level geolocators, GPS and GSM tags. So coming to the satellite transmitters, the same example which we have seen before. So here the exact location is can be calculated, and the information obtained is often real-time information. Many times the information attained from satellite transmitters are actually real-time observation. I can actually track the bird where it is right now. So it is for mostly for larger birds because it's heavy. These kind of transmitters are quite heavy, so it is mostly attached in the larger birds. So it can be downloaded in a receiver station. Since it is a real-time data mostly, so we can of course download it. That once the this instrument is put on the bird, once this kind of instrument is put on the bird, we don't need to retrieve it. Many of these kind of instruments are sort of detachable on their own. Sometimes we fit them in a backpack way, so the backpack may loosen up, or the if the bird is molting or something happens, so it can fall off easily. But since it's a real time, it includes satellite transmissions and everything. It's a very costly study technique. Though the study technique is very, very important in many ways. Uh, so other tracking devices are light level geolocators. So here you can see this is a tracking of Arctic tern. So Arctic tern is known for the longest migration on Earth. So it travels around 90,000 kilometers. Uh, in one go. So you can see here it is somewhere in the Greenland. It is coming towards the South Pole. And the dots which you see are the areas where the bird might have stopped for some time. So what they have done is they have incorporated these light level geolocators. So you can see the size; it's very, very small. And this geolocators have been incorporated in the leg of the Arctic terns, and they have let them go. Then once they have completed the whole migration cycle and gone back to Greenland, they were able to catch again the same bird and retrieve it. And then they were able to find out what happened exactly with the route of the bird. So why they need to retrieve this is because these kind of geolocators, they cannot give real time data. So the data is stored in the same this instrument, and then you have to retrieve it. So it's very difficult to retrieve all this all these geolocators. Why? Because mostly 1 out of 5 birds or 1 out of 10 birds only you will be able to retrieve, and it is very unlikely, or it is so you have to mark in such intensity that you are able to at least retrieve in some of the birds. So these geolocators work on the function of like this daylight. So every place on the earth have its own daylight, like the sunrise and sunset time. So this instrument calculate the locations depending upon the when the sun rises and when the sun sets. So and they, because already we know that every place on the earth have its own time, have its own sunrise time and sunset time. So accordingly, this calculate the ways. This particular instrument is it's okay to use on birds like Arctic tern, which migrates for a long distance. But though it's a cheap instrument, it's not an ideal instrument to use in a very short distance migration, because we will not get a very clear picture of what is happening. We will rather get a bulge of movement here and there. So it will not be very clear. Why it will not be clear is because if the bird is moving closer by, there won't be much difference of sunrise and sunset in that particular area. Hence, you will not get a very clear picture of what is happening with the migration path. Another interesting study is the GPS GSM tags. So these are the tags which again it works on the principle of SIM cards like our mobile is. So you have certain SIM cards which are incorporated in the bird. Now here in the picture you can see that it is there in the back. So it is having even solar panels also to recharge the battery. So what happens in this bird is that whenever it goes nearby an antenna, for example, any like a mobile tower or anything. So it receives a message. This message is transmitted to any of our mobile number, and we get a message sort of where the bird is moving. In a plain language is what I can make understand. So what happens in this, for example, for this particular researchers who did study and these birds. So what happened? This eagle, they incorporated this GSM GPS tags on them, and these birds flew further than they imagined, and they started gaining roaming charges. So when we move around lot of places, so we gather a lot of roaming charges. Now, of course, it's not the case. Earlier, it used to be that if you go around a lot outside your if you are in Odisha, so if you go to other states, so there will be roaming charges. So these birds flew to many countries, and they were there out for a very long time. So whenever they used to come closer to any of the receiving station or any of the towers, they used to get message. So this particular team was struggling because these birds were so much roaming around that they got a lot of roaming charges which have to face. Of course, they were able to resolve it with the company, and they were able to get back the data which they could. So, an interesting example of how not every study, every study technique may work for a bird. So, it depend upon your questions, what are you asking, and how you should study these birds. Another is this is an example of radar studies. So here you can see the movement of birds which is happening. This is not done in many of the countries. You can see this is mostly a US based work, but it is also not an old it's not a recent study. It's quite an old study. It have been done. So this what they do is they are able to understand that the radar can detect movement, that everybody knows. So these are radars which can detect in movement, whether this is a bird which is going or this is insect, or there are bats, so or there are aircraft. So they are able to sort of understand that movement of the birds. So here in the picture you can see they are only showing, so there will be a lot of movement in the sky in many ways, so they can filter out which are the bird movements. So this is an example of bird cast. That's a program which is going on, and here you can see how the bird is moving in massive flocks. So this is also an example that how the birds are studied, not necessarily in with other study techniques, but this study technique is actually giving you a mass picture which otherwise we will not be able to see. And mostly radar studies are done for the night nocturnal birds which will be traveling. Daytime, of course, there are other processes which we can, but this is mostly applicable for night studies. Back. So this is a quick example of how the bird migration happens and how we can study them. Migratory birds are facing a lot of threats. I hope you will be having more classes on what are the threats of birds, and you will see that why more emphasis is given that what is happening to these migratory birds. I hope you have more good lectures on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhumita. It was an interesting talk. So there are some questions.
Yeah, I want to see how should I see. Yeah.
Yeah. Should I read it out for you or?
I'll read out. I would like to bring to your kind notice that probably you erroneously mentioned that lipids are used for instantaneous energy. I think it is not so. Lipids are stored energy and mobilized as carbohydrates gradually to provision of instantaneous energy. Kindly correct me if I'm mistaken. Added gradually to provision instantaneous energy. No, you are not mistaken. You are correct. So if we see a V formation of bird, does that mean they are likely to be migrating? No. No, it's not like that. See, V formations are just easy to uh, if you go to any wetland, so V formations you only see, when there is a large, like there are many birds, it's a flock of birds, a huge flock of birds which will be moving. So in these kind where the birds are actually bigger, this will you will not see mostly on small birds, but mostly in the larger, heavier birds. So they will be moving, from one place to another also. So not necessarily they will be migrating. Sometimes they will be moving from one wetland to a nearby wetland, and that also they will do in V formation. So that's the way they move, but it not necessarily they are migrating. They are just moving from another place. Um, To know more about migrating ducks, watch Wild Robot movie. Oh, okay, thank you. I don't know about Wild Robot movie. Um, can ringing affect behavior of other birds of same species towards the ringed birds? Can can ringing affect behavior of other birds of same? Yeah. Yeah. Most of my colleagues and all, we used to think that whether this happens or not. So no, we consciously haven't seen anything that which is affecting the behavior. I will tell you some of it. Mm, there is this ruddy shell ducks. Ruddy shell ducks, if you people just you can Google it how it looks. So this ruddy shell duck, we have observed that when we ring this bird, so we always used to get them in pair, these ruddy shell ducks, and whenever we ring them, after we leave them, they will go around and they will be started talking around, like they will be calling, and they will be and then we will not get any other ruddy shell ducks for some time being. And we have seen the same thing happening in many other places also. That another example is we have tagged skimmers in somewhere in we have tagged skimmers in Chambal, and the same bird have come to Jamnagar. And we were actually following the flock in Jamnagar when we came to know that these birds have come. And when we were trying to go closer to take picture of the tags, because we have tagged them, we saw that the tagged bird sort of all the birds flew apart, and the tagged bird remained, and it was sort of watching movement. And suddenly another bird came, and it landed beside and sort of poked the bird, and both of them flew back. And that was one instance, and there are many instances where I have seen that the tagged birds is actually along the flock of the birds which is there. So I don't think that they do. Um, Yes, so I hope I answered your question, that we haven't seen any change in bird behavior towards the ringed bird behavior of a non-ringed bird towards a ringed bird. We haven't seen any. I'm interested in Mayank question too. Where is Mayank question? Okay, I have already answered. Time with the how solitary birds migrate like sandpipers. Yeah, so many of the birds migrate alone. It's not like that they migrate in a group. So sandpipers, there is example of sandpipers is again of the fastest flying bird. Oh, sandpipers you are talking. How solitary birds migrate like sandpipers. So sandpipers don't migrate solitary. We haven't seen any any sandpipers who migrate solitary. They mostly migrate in groups. There so far have not been any example where a solitary bird would be migrate. So even if you see a particular species of sandpiper which will be alone in a flock of some other sandpipers, so it most probably have flown with the same group. It's not necessarily that some of the species will fly with the same species. They can fly with other species also. Is V formation to save energy? Yes, the V formation is to save energy. It is easier for them to travel, and the rest of the birds also to travel. It is to do with the sort of how to say, it is the same principle why we for when the fighter jets also follow the same principle of birds, why there will be one heading and the rest will be on the back end. So actually the barrier is broken by the first who is there, and the wind with the flapping of wind is so that it reduces the turbulence for the birds which are back. So yes, it's an extremely energy saving practice which they do.
Hi, Madhumita. I want to ask about solitary migration. So, how solitary birds migrate? If can they migrate alone, or like how they do that? This question is banging on my head.
There are certain birds who do migrate alone. It's not like every bird migrates. So every bird migrates in a group. They migrate as usual. It's not like there is any other way of migration. They migrate as same as the group migration. There is no difference. Uh, Only there are hardly any examples of like where the birds will be solitary, absolutely solitary. But let me get back to you on this. Probably I can write the answer sometime. Uh, I asked about V formation because yesterday I saw a large flock of large birds in V flying west from the coast of Bombay, and the next land in that direction is Arabian. And the next land in that direction is Arabia. So I wondered. Flying west from the coast of Bombay, and the next land is okay. Yeah, so no, so they must be depending where are you in Mumbai. So many of the birds like we now know is for if I can say flamingos, if you would have seen flamingos, so they are going exactly to the opposite side of the so Maharashtra, it depends. It's not Arabian Sea, and then there will be an island also. So not necessarily they will be going, but that doesn't that's could be there also could be high possibility that they will be migrating towards somewhere, but somewhere means from Bombay to Gujarat is what we know now, so not necessarily they will be flying somewhere out, probably to the very nearby land. I noticed. So, the person in Mumbai, just check your location where you have seen. Check the location on a map. Uh, do you see any place nearby? So probably the bird are going. If you don't see anything nearby, they are going to the nearest, or they're probably going to Gujarat. I noticed some birds V shape when they move, especially at evening. Yes. So it this V shape phenomena is not exclusive to migratory birds, long distance migratory birds. Every evening when the birds fly, even in the Hiranari, you will see the V shape is happening. It is for the same purpose, is to easy flying, to manage aerodynamics. It's the same principle. So I wondered if they are migrating. Thanks for Gujarat. Gujarat, okay. No, but then I think Gujarat, you must see where are the nearby islands. I don't know where you are in Mumbai. If you can tell me where you are at Mumbai, then I probably can give
Hi,
you.
it's me, Madhumita. I'm Dilip. Yeah, it's right. Actually, I saw them off in Bandra, which is where I live. There's something called the Sea Link, which connects Worli to Bandra. So it's the extreme
Yes.
of the city. And we were coming along that Sea Link, and we saw these birds directly above us, flying west. And so it just struck me that they're going west. They probably could have turned and headed towards Gujarat, but to me it looked like they were heading directly west, and west in that direction is Arabia. So that's all. I
So
mean,
it's probably it's another is if there will be a low tide sometime when you were passing, or would be a high tide when you were passing. So it also depends that the movement will be depending upon what is the tide cycle during that time. If it would have been low tide, you probably wouldn't be seeing them flying. Uh, or if at all there was a low tide approaching, you saw them during west. So I'm assuming that was a high tide.
okay.
And they are probably going towards another area which is easy for them for roosting.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you. Skimmers from Chambal, you mentioned where and which season they are migrating. So yeah, skimmers from Chambal, they start around May, June, July. So they July, August. So just prior hitting the monsoon, they start migrating. We have seen Chambal skimmers going towards Bangladesh also. So they take uh, what is it called, Yamuna. They take the Yamuna route and they go towards Bangladesh, which is sort of how to say, um, I forgot the term for it. So there are these all these mud flats where they are. So the skimmers prefer to winter in the coastal areas, and but they prefer rivers, freshwater rivers during the breeding season. So skimmers from Chambal is many of the individuals, we have the tagged individuals. So you have seen them in Gujarat, specifically in Jamnagar. We have seen them in Porbandar also. Mostly all the flocks come to Jamnagar, and we have seen them in Bangladesh, and we have seen just one marked bird of Chambal in Andhra. I like one of like we also work on Mahanadi birds. So Mahanadi skimmers, they come down to Andhra and Koringa mostly. So this is how they move. Is Indian pitta migratory bird? Once I found it in my native, now there is no sign of pitta. Yes, Indian pitta is a migratory bird, but that's a great example of local migration, particularly because so they breed somewhere in, like, they breed some of the population in Maharashtra, and then they come down towards south. So in monsoon, you will see lot of calls. If you go along Maharashtra coast in during the monsoon, you will hear lot of pittas all during the breeding cycle, and then they come off during October and November. So if you are somewhere in Point Calumet, in Tamil Nadu during the month of September end or October, you will see lot of pittas. So that is how they are just, they are migrating down south during that time. Now there is no sign of pitta. I'll now anyway, now there you won't be hearing them, but probably the next season, if you are not aware of the call of the pitta, I will highly recommend, just to remember the call and keep your ears open. You probably hear them the next season you are coming in. So do birds who continue to migrate for days use their reserved fat? If yes, the weight of the fat, assuming the birds weigh in mere gram, doesn't impact their speed of capability. Not necessarily. They don't impact the capability. They are almost double the usual weight. The birds, they usually gain double of the weight. They are built to preserve this fat in a way that they can climb, they can sustain the flight and the longevity of the flight so long. If yes, the weight of the fat, assuming bird weight in milligram, doesn't impact the seed. So yes, they use their reserved fat. That is why they reserve this fat for long duration. You are right. To admin, can we access recording of this lecture, please? Okay.
I have
Yes,
I replied to
okay.
that. Yeah.
Is red Ardavat also a migratory bird? Uh, 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 Let me get back to you with that, Red Avadat, because I understand that there is local migration, but how much local, I'm not sure. So I'll get back to you on that. I got on late and I have to go now.
Yeah. So I think.
Oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Dilip ji, thank you.
Thank you, Madhumita. I think we're on time to wind up. So
Yeah.
please post if anyone has any further questions, please post in a discussion forum. So I will copy that to Madhumita and get back to you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the wonderful session. And thank you everyone for joining in.
Ma'am,
I'm
can I ask one question to Madhumita ma'am?
Yeah, please.
For a long time जो birds fly करते हैं ना
हाँ जी, हाँ जी.
ma'am, I can speak in Bengali.
हाँ, बोलिए. मैं I can understand.
তো যে সমস্ত পাখিরা লং টার্ম ধরে লাইক গডউইট যারা লং টার্ম ফ্লাই করে এবং অনেকটা দূর থেকে পেরিয়ে আসে 11 দিন ধরে ফ্লাই করছে, তো তাদের ক্ষেত্রে আমরা কি ধরনের ম্যাগনেটিক ফিল্ড দেখতে পাই বা তাদের মধ্যে কি ধরনের চেঞ্জেস আছে? ধরুন আপনি বললেন যে নতুন ফেদার আছে, নতুন বিক্স আছে, তো আমরা গডউইটের কাছে কি দেখতে পারি বা কি ধরনের মাইগ্রেটরি ফিচার্স দেখতে পারি যাতে টানা 11 দিন, রাইট, 11 দিন ধরে ওরা ফ্লাই করে আসছে, তো তাদের কাছে এমন কিছু এক্সট্রা ফিচার্স থাকতে পারে বা ওরা কেন লাইক ডারউইনসের যেটা থিওরিম আছে, যেটা আমরা বলি যে কোনো একটা অঙ্গের ব্যবহারের সূত্র যেটা, তো ওদের ক্ষেত্রে কেন এক্সট্রা ফিচার্স হিসেবে লাইক এয়ার সেক্স বেশি হলো না, কেন 9টা সব পাখির আছে ওদেরও 9টাই থাকলো, ওদের কেন এক্সট্রা এলো না? তো এটার কোনো এক্সপ্লেনেশন আছে?
Okay, if I understood correctly, what he's saying is there any kind of unusual feature on this particular bird, like Bartel Godwit, because it is able to fly for so many days compared to any other birds? Is that what you mean?
Yes, ma'am. After all, they fly day and night. They cannot
Yes.
stop anywhere.
Yes.
They're flying.
Yes.
They they
So,
they
uh,
there are very much matters involved in this. Like they are controlled by day and night. The compasses you just said on the class in this class. Uh,
so see this example. Uh, for now, I will tell you. So the previous sir who was from Mumbai, he was talking about a sea link, right? So let's say that our sea link is let's say 100 kilometers long. Okay, there is in that particular sea link, I don't have any refueling station. There is no refueling station. So I have to ensure that my vehicle, for traveling 100 kilometers non-stop, I cannot stop. Non-stop, I have that much fuel in my vehicle, and I cannot stop because there is no way to stop. If I stop, there will be a fine, for example, and so I cannot stop. I have to travel. For Bartel Godwit, so this particular individual who took actually 11 like non-stop days traveling, there was no stop there. If you see the Greenland, sorry, yeah, no, not Greenland. It was from somewhere from Russia to Australia. It traveled over the sea. So there was no stop for that particular bird. This bird, unlike some other waders, there is only one particular wader who can swim on the sea. This Bartel godwit cannot swim on the sea. They want land. When the bird traveled 11 days, there was no land. It was absolutely there is no land, and it landed on the 11th day. It landed on the land. So this extreme migration is a result that the bird took a quick migration. Just, just 11 days, it reached thousands of kilometers. It probably easy for it rather to stop somewhere, because if it is stopping somewhere, it might be, prone to any kind of predation, or maybe the food will not be available. So it fed up in such a way that it could travel non-stop and reach the ultimate destination. From there, he don't have to move anywhere. That bird wintered completely there, and then it took another route to go back. So, in cases where these extreme migrations happening, many times the bird doesn't have an option. So, hence they are going to extreme migration. Did it explain to your question, sir?
yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I got
Right.
it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah. So shall we wind up then? Thank you so much, Madhumita. So if any questions there, I'll post to you. I mean, I'll email you, or I'll post in the Google Doc so that
Yes.
you can send the reply to the students. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, and sorry everybody. I was very, very late today. I'm sorry. Thank you.